Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. This is Nicholas Peter Ugero, and today I have the pleasure and honor of having Courtney Turner on my channel today. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I really do
Mhm.
appreciate it. I know that you have a very busy schedule, so I very much appreciate you coming on today. I really do appreciate that. So, for anyone that's not aware of who you are, unfortunately, if you want to give a brief introduction about yourself and what you're all about.
Sure. Well, my name's Courtney Turner. I am the host of the Courtney Turner podcast. I started just the beginning of 2021. I actually aired like a bunch. I didn't air them. I had recorded some in 2020, but my first official episode aired in 2021, January. And I think we have over 500, maybe close to 550 videos now. Up on my channels. You can find that at CourtenayTurner.com. I spell my name a little bit differently. It's like Courtenay. So it's CourtenayTurner.com. It is Courtenay. It's just spelled like Courtenay. So for those who are listening and not watching, that is how it's spelled. And I also do a weekly show with Dr. Lee Merritt. We call it The Dangerous Dane. And I also sometimes do a show with Ryan Christian. It's called Pirate. It's under the banner of Pirate Stream Media, which is a concept where we're trying to develop and expand and bring people under that umbrella. But right now we do a show. It's called The Dialectical Dissonance, and I also do conferences. Last year I did one. It was called the Cause Fest, and that was creative artists uniting for the sovereignty of everyone. And the idea behind that was to give a platform to those who've been canceled and to really just to bring art that wasn't under the banner of mainstream culture creation, socially engineering the masses, and to show that there could be good, clean fun. So that was what we did last year in June, and there were 53 acts. Ryan Christian was in it, Scott Armstrong. We had tons of comedians and singers and musicians and filmmakers. I'm a aerial acrobatic artist, and I did 2 aerial routines. And then recently I did a conference. It's called the Cognitive Liberty Conference. We're hoping that's going to be the first of a series of conferences. And this is really all about deprogramming, exiting the matrix, understanding the nature of political, psychological, dialectical warfare. So the first day was really all about education and how the youth are being eroded of cognitive liberty and brainwashed and programmed and mind controlled. And in many cases, really, it's child abuse. So trying to deprogram that, give them tools to build true cognitive liberty. And then day 2 was really trying to break down dialectical means of warfare tactics and what is the dialectic, what are the philosophical roots and origin, and how does that apply to our everyday lives. So yeah, I don't know. Any more you want to know, I guess ask.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, because you're definitely busy. You're definitely getting a lot of stuff done. It's very, very, admirable, and I respect that a lot. Because I first saw you on the Pirate Streams uh, podcast, and so just hearing you and Ryan, and then I forgot the other gentleman. Do you remember the other gentleman, the third host that was there
Scott
temporarily?
Armstrong used
Scott.
to be, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
but now he's moved on to some other things. So scheduling conflicts. Yeah. So now it's just Ryan and I together. So
yeah, so I've been watching you guys. I forgot how long you guys been doing it, at least a year. So I've been definitely enjoying that, just the discussions, and then you guys don't agree on everything, which is great because then you guys can still have respectful dialogue, which is
yes.
what it's all about. Like it's a great example of what can be done when you're just open-minded
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have like that ego and you're open to like all possibilities. So like that's something that I really like and respect about you for sure. So you've already kind of delved into it a little bit. So, in terms of like passions, like your personal passions, like what's the main driver for you in terms of like just the space and like what do you want to kind of like get across for most people?
So I when I first started, I said my main message was the preservation of the free will of humanity. I very much feel like that's what's at stake right now. And I would say that's really been kind of my message throughout. But yeah, I started out in 2020 when I was living in Santa Monica, California, and everyone was all masked up. And I'm hearing impaired. I learned how to speak by reading lips. I actually didn't get hearing aids till I was almost 6 years old. And I didn't really realize how much I still depend on nonverbal cues and lip reading for clarity of speech and for the ability to communicate until all the coping mechanisms I spent my life developing were then stripped from me. So I found myself just very isolated, very depressed. It was a very, very trying time for me. And long story, not so short, but in the gist is that people had suggested I started a podcast. I really knew nothing about podcasts. So this wasn't a world or a milieu I was versed. And I started researching, I started listening to some. The whole idea actually really terrified me until it dawned on me that it would be an opportunity to have naked face conversations, and that just might save my life. And so I spent, as I had mentioned, I spent the first 6 months recording, but not airing them. And so I had just made a commitment to myself to record for 6 months. And I told everybody who I had interviewed that these were just going to be conversations. I might not air them, but I just wanted to have the experience of naked face conversation. So that really was how I started. And, as I've gone on, it's become much deeper of a dive, and I went down the rabbit hole pretty quickly, I would say. So it was kind of this rip the band-aid off, and oh my gosh, the wound is pretty deep. So that's I would say that's kind of what I've been diving into, the origins and roots of the New World Order, and hopefully trying to figure out ways that we can at least slow it down, if not stop it. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for me, like it was 2016 when Bernie Sanders was being stolen from like in all the states in the
mm-hmm.
in the primaries, and then he just rolled over like a dog at the end and said, "Oh, I support Hillary." And so I was like, "Okay, this is ridiculous." And I used to watch Fox before that, so I went from the right to the left, and then I was like, "Okay, this
Right.
is all just dumb. Nothing's
Yeah.
changing." And
Mm-hmm.
then I watched the Zeitgeist documentaries, and
Mm-hmm.
it talks about certain things that yeah, I'm totally in agreement with, but then I went beyond that after a while, but
Mm-hmm.
it got my foot in the door of just thinking of like outside of politics. Like we have so many other options that we could do and how we can kind of collaborate, like think outside the
Mm-hmm.
box. So for me, I've put my foot into like to certain things, but then like I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a master of all trade or jack of all trades, but master of none. Like I have a couple things I'm kind of delving into a lot more than others, but some of the other
Sure.
stuff is kind of surface level. So for yourself, like what are the key, like the big, like top three things that you're like really focused on? Because I know you talked about like education, the preservation of like the free will of like humanity, and like learning about the new world order and how we can kind of like slow that down. Is there
Mm-hmm.
anything like in particular that you're like really, really focused on as opposed to like other things?
Well, I'm much like you. I would say I'm very much a jack of all trades, master of none, and that's kind of been the story of my life. That's always how I've been. But I would say the big things for me. One of the big kind of light bulb moments for me was learning about Tavistock, the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, and that led me really down the rabbit hole of understanding the nature of the British intelligence apparatus, how that connects to the Five Eyes, psychological operations, and reconnaissance, and the covert research projects that occur under that umbrella. So I would say a lot of my research has been centered there, some of my deeper work. And that is mostly because that was the thing that was kind of that big eureka moment for me. So I've been doing a lot of research on that. I think I've done something like 30 shows on Tavistock and its progenitor, the Wellington House. I've also really done a lot of deep dive work into the religious, spiritual nature of the UN, who has partnered with the World Economic Forum in 2019, and so the theosophical roots of that. And of course, that has a lot of ties actually to the Fabians and to British, the Psychical Society, the Society for Psychical Research, which has a lot of overlap with the Wellington House and the British intelligence apparatus. So I've been diving into a lot of that, the roots of theosophy, and now they have kind of morphed into new thought, which is, it's very similar. It's just a stronger focus on mentalism, the mentalist aspect of theosophy, but how that ties into this kind of greater spiritual underpinnings of what we're seeing out of the UN and the World Economic Forum and some of these globalist agendas. And then, of course, education, but it all kind of ties together. I did, for when I started, my focus was much more on the medical tyranny. And I still investigate a lot of that. I do a show with Dr. Lee Merritt, which a lot of that tends to be more focused on medicine, science, and health freedom. So, yeah.
Wow, fantastic. So yeah, that's I can definitely understand why you'd focus on that one because you pretty much started in 2020,
Hmm.
2021, so that makes total
Right.
sense. So in terms of content creation, so this was one that I'm very interested in just because of how much like in just such a short amount of time you've been able to create such a vast wealth of,
Mhm.
content that people can check out.
Mhm.
So which is awesome for me. So
Mhm.
in terms of like recording yourself, so that was something that's very, very important. So like for beginners, so
Mhm.
like in terms of like recording yourself, making videos, setting up interviews,
Mhm.
just in terms of that aspect alone, regardless of the not counting the like events that you've done, but
Mhm.
just in terms of content creation, whether it's like podcasts, whatever it may be, do you have any sort of tips and tricks for people that are still on the sidelines, wanting to kind of get their feet wet into this, or just having or kind of like scared to do it, and how to
Sure.
kind of get them out of that shell and become creators instead of just consumers of media?
Mhm. So when I first started, I had no equipment. I mean, I literally had a laptop. So I didn't even have a microphone. If you listen to some of my earlier episodes, I apologize for the audio quality and even the video. It's not like I had a camera. It was just me and my laptop. So, and I think it's an Air Mac. I mean, it's not a top of the line computer even. So that's really how I started. And you'll see some even the in person podcasts I had done at the time were just me filming from Zoom on my laptop. So I'd encourage people. A lot of people think when they start, the question I always get asked is about equipment and the technology. And I always tell people that I really wouldn't put too much focus on that in the very beginning. In the beginning, I would really focus on content. What is it that you have to say? Why is it that you want to start a show or any kind of content creation? What is your message? What do you want to say? The other thing I would say is that people had all sorts of opinions about branding when I started. And as I had mentioned, for me, this was really a personal journey. It was much more of about me feeling like I had something to do, something to look forward to. I don't want to be morbid about it, but as I mentioned, I was really depressed and very isolated. So it was much more about connecting with other people and feeling kind of some sense of purpose and joy and fulfillment. So it really wasn't, I wasn't thinking about it in the sense of a business. So it's different for people who that is their purpose in starting some sort of content creation, but that's not where I came from. And so people had all sorts of ideas about branding and, how I should do it. And I remember a lot of people told me that I should make it, 15 minutes or shorter every episode. Otherwise, nobody would listen. And I remember making the joke, "Hi, my name is Courtney. My name is spelled long." Like, that's just not going to happen. I'm a deep dive person. I'm a long form person. So I just knew that that wasn't going to be authentic for me. And I've actually found some of my longest episodes have been my most viewed or most listened. So that formula, so to speak, doesn't necessarily work for everyone. I understand time is limited. We're in the information age where there's just a barrage constantly of information, propaganda, disinformation, and entertainment. So I know time is limited, and of course, it's hopeful if you can have smaller chunks and smaller bites for people to digest. So maybe doing clips or something like that might be beneficial from a content creation perspective. But for me, it just didn't resonate to do short videos. I knew that wasn't going to be my style. So I think that all that long-winded explanation to say I would be authentic. What is it you're really trying to accomplish? Who are you? What is your message? Well, what is your purpose in creating anything at all? For me, because it was really a personal journey, I was very invested in, the authenticity of it. So I didn't listen to a whole lot of the branding. And as I've gone along, of course, this has become it's just too time consuming for it to be anything other than a business. I don't have time to do this and then have a 9 to 5 on top of it. There's just not enough hours in the day. There's honestly not enough hours in the day to do what I do. So, at some point the operation's got to either grow and become profitable or it's going to end. So, I've unfortunately had to think more strategically about that sort of thing and update the technology, the equipment. I do now have cameras and microphones, as you can see, to try to make this a more pleasant and aesthetically and auditorily pleasing experience for the audience. Sorry, that was really long-winded. All that was really just to say, I think people focus on it in the reverse. I had somebody tell me once that entrepreneurialism is kind of, people always think about like aim and fire, and entrepreneurialism, which is kind of what the content creation space is really the opposite. It's like fire then aim. You really have to kind of get into it, and then you'll refine it as you go along. As you do it, you'll figure out what is your niche, what are your strengths, what are your passions, and let those guide you. And then, of course, as it grows, you'll get feedback from your audience and, take the temperature of the room, and hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was definitely not long-winded at all because I want it to be, detailed. So that's something I definitely find value in. So I thank you for that. So I do have 2 comments from the same person: mandatory myocarditis.
Mhm.
Hey, I like Courtney. And then heard some of work about Tavistock. So that's awesome. So thank you so much for being here. Really do appreciate it. And then one thing that definitely stood out was right in the beginning of like when we first started the interview was like you recorded yourself for 6 months and you even told the people that you're doing those conversations with, I might not even post them. It's just more so for like myself. So that's something I would definitely recommend for people if they're like hesitant about getting into the content creation space. Maybe
Yeah.
they don't think they sound really good. They don't like the way their voice sounds, whatever else.
Right.
That's a perfect thing to do. So not even without having to do conversations with people yourself,
Mhm.
just do recordings. Just record yourself almost like just an audio podcast of just you talking and then listen back to it. So for myself, like it was something that like everyone thinks they sound weird because they're not used to hearing it that way. They're used to hearing
Right.
it from from the way that it is just normally. So it's
Sure.
just completely different. Everyone thinks they sound weird. So like that was the
Mhm.
same thing with me, but then over time I just got used to it and I don't even think about it. It just
Mhm.
sounds normal to me now. So
Yeah,
that's
right.
something to really get people's feet wet too, is to just record stuff, play it back.
Mhm.
Also do videos and just it doesn't matter because like if you're
Mhm.
not gonna post it, you can just slip up. It doesn't matter whatsoever. No one's gonna judge you. It's just
Mhm.
for your own experience. So I think that that's something that's also really really good. So I like that as well. And
Mhm.
then when you talk about shoot first and then like give your name, like get the branding afterwards,
Yeah.
like that's definitely what I would recommend as well, especially since post 2016, especially post 2020, in terms of content creators, you're going to have a very hard time of just like breaking through. So if you're just trying
Oh,
to get the branding as best as you can before you even start, I mean, it's just going to time's ticking. Like it's just getting it's just getting harder and harder to get into this space because of all the
yeah.
censorship and things like that. So definitely like for me, like I don't really have any branding. It's just my name is my channel because
Right.
I've just kind of done like different things at different times. It wasn't until like I was asked to do an interview that's when I started doing interviews because then I got
Mm.
familiar with the process of doing that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So I loved your answer to that. And
Mhm.
so in terms of making videos or setting up interviews, so
Mhm.
obviously you have a podcast, you're
Mhm.
cranking out podcasts a lot. So what is your like kind of go to like set of uh, steps that you take for getting somebody on or communicating with them in the first place, and then just
Mhm.
organizing things like topics or whatever else, and just making sure everything is as smooth as possible for that
Mhm.
process.
So I don't have like a very strategic process, and I unfortunately never did. I get asked this question all the time, actually, and perhaps that's part of why uh, I was able to start a podcast. I mean, I had people lined up right away. This was never. I think in the beginning I had made kind of a list of like my dream people, and I do recommend people do that. I should still do it. But my schedule got filled up so quickly. I went through a couple of periods where I was really nervous about like having, being able to fill the schedule. And then of course it was like way overfull really quickly. And I realized it was a very silly fear or concern. But from the very beginning, as I said, I reached out to people under the auspices that I might never, release them. So it really was just about the conversation, and that's actually really how I've approached it always, and it's still today how I approach it. It's about what conversation do I want to have? What's on my mind? What topics are pressing right now? And then I would look for people who are experts in those areas. So what was of pressing issue to me and possibly in the world, or in my area, and what were those issues and who might be a good person to discuss them with. So that's kind of how I sought people. But I found pretty quickly a lot of people are looking for some sort of a platform. So a lot of people will approach you to be on the show. And I found that as time went on, I really just due to time constraints, I've had to be much more discerning and much more limited in who I could bring on, because I just don't have enough hours to bring everybody on. And people will take the opportunity because people want a platform to be able to share whatever it is they're promoting. And while I encourage that, and that's great, I think that if you have something specific that you're trying to accomplish, it's important to be perspicacious with your time. So the organizing and setting up of the podcast is not something that I'm like, that I have too much guidance or advice on, because it kind of happened just very organically. Really from the beginning. And even now, I typically, one thing I will say just in terms of technology, I use Calendly, which I find very helpful, because otherwise I double book. Sometimes I triple book myself. So that's that can be problematic. So it definitely have a way of streamlining your calendar. I think that's really important. But my format of I do mostly long form interviews, but I also do a radio show once a week, and I typically film that. So it'll be more of a lecture style show where I'm lecturing on a topic that I've done, some sort of research on. So I have that, and then I have the Dangerous Dame show, and then, I go on shows like this. So yeah.
Wow. So my next question is just to go along with that. So what do you do to limit or just remove completely like burnout? So for myself, that's something that I was always doing. I would just get into something and keep doing it, keep doing it until I was just exhausted. I just couldn't handle it and I had to drop off. Like same thing with my content creation. Like I would just put so much into it and just not give myself that time to rest and
Mhm.
recuperate. And then I would just get burned out and then I would just not post something for quite a long time. So you're obviously got a lot on your plate in terms of people like even asking you to come on your
Mhm.
channel, which is awesome. That's a
Mhm.
great problem to have. I have too many
Sure.
people that want to come on. That's fantastic. So what do you do to limit burnout in your own personal life, especially with like the content creation?
It's a really great question. I wish I was better at it. I'm kind of just I'm like a bit of a workhorse, so I just kind of go quite a bit. But I have like a couple of things that are pretty not negotiable for me. I like to have my workouts in the morning, and anything that gets in the way of that is very problematic for me. I typically don't allow anything to interfere with that. There's always exceptions, but that's kind of like my time. I'm an aerialist, and right now I'm not performing. I have not done a formal, like a professional performance in a while, but I still like to keep that up because it's like creative, kind of not content creation, but a different type of creative medium, and that's an outlet for me. And then I think it's important to spend time with loved ones, so I try to incorporate that. And yeah, other than that, I don't know. But I will say that I think in the next few months, I'm going to have to take a pause because I need to write. I have a book that has to get written, and it's not going to get written with pumping out, like I put out usually around 6 episodes a week, but sometimes I'll film 4 or 5 in a day. So yeah, there's going to need to be a bit of a break. So yeah.
You do 6 in a week?
Yeah,
Holy
most weeks I
moly.
put out 6, and sometimes I've filmed 5 in a day before. So, yeah.
That's nuts. Like, I know I've done, like, 3 interviews in 1 day, and that seemed like a lot, but to
Oh,
do
it's a lot.
yeah, do 5 in 1 day and then do 6 in a week, and you're doing that pretty consistently,
Mhm.
that's fantastic. So, yeah, definitely, like, especially with working out,
Mhm.
I can attest to that, like, for me, I try to do it in the mornings before I have to go
Mhm.
to work,
Yeah.
sometimes if I have to do, like, a closing or something, but it just definitely just gets you a lot more centered, a lot more clear-headed, and a lot more confident. Like for me, I just feel really great about myself, and I actually do have a boost of energy, even though you think that you'd
Yeah.
be exhausted.
Yeah.
So like it definitely helps you just get prepared for the day. So that's definitely good that you have like those boundaries kind of set. Like I
Yeah.
need to have this in place, otherwise like nothing else is really gonna, like that's my foundational thing. Otherwise
Yeah.
everything else is just gonna suffer for that. So that's really good. Um, so in terms of being objective, oh no, so actually
Oh,
we still have that second part. So
okay.
for content creation in this other
Mhm.
sense, in terms of events, so making
Mm,
events, collaborating with other people, doing that networking, and like just the logistics of that. Like, because I
right.
know like I already saw some of your um, Cognitive Liberty conference. So I
Mm.
already almost finished the entire first day.
Oh, wow.
So like obviously you have some like audio issues or like the stream, like it's like the
Yeah.
quality kind of jumps up and down here and there, but that just comes with the territory. So like just handling all of that stuff, whether it's like getting people together, or scheduling that so everyone like everything like works together, promoting it, all like the nuts and bolts of that if you want to get into that as much as or as little as you want.
Sure. So I think people, when they see some of the events and the productions we put together, they have this like this notion that it's a, it's an enterprise, and it's not. It's me and my fiance, and it's just the two of us. So we had looked to hire some people to handle the technical. So that means the filming and the live streaming, but it was way beyond our means, unfortunately. We didn't have a big fancy sponsor, and we are not a big outfit. It's just us, and so the budget was pretty tight. So what we did was we realized that what they were quoting was so expensive that we could take that money and for a lot less buy equipment. Unfortunately, that meant that he had to learn how to do the entire filming and live streaming. So it's kind of as I said, this is a fire and then aim. And so I will just, for those of you who've had the difficulties and have purchased tickets, we are still selling tickets, and we are in the process of editing that to clean up some of the audio, clean up some of the glitches, and put it on a different platform that will be much more user friendly. So I think the content was worth doing that. I think that this really exceeded my expectations for what it would be. And that says a lot. I'm very aware of the people I invited. I knew the caliber of their work, so I had set the bar very high, and the fact that it exceeded that is really saying quite a bit. So I do think it's worth it, and the tickets are incredibly cheap. I mean, I've done a lot of affiliates for various online conferences, and most of them charge more than we did for our in person. So to be getting 2 days for $25 or one day for 1776 is really, a steal in my opinion. So if this is something you're interested in, I think it's worth it. But all that to say, yeah, you kind of just have to fire and then aim. So, our approach to it was that we're going to do the best we can with what we have, and hopefully those glitches were not too distracting, but we are going to clean it up so that you'll have a more seamless experience viewing it.
Awesome. Yeah. So I didn't even realize it was just you two guys because that was looking good. You guys had like different angles. You guys had like where like the video would come up with the slideshow as well. Like I thought
Yep.
it was really good. I wouldn't have even guessed it was just you two. That's incredible that you guys were able to do that. And
Thank
I
you.
haven't even gotten to the second day either. So
It was a major, massive undertaking. And really for the people who were there in person, I mean, it was this beautiful venue. We had a violinist come and play during the break. We had for the people who came for the VIP dinner, we had like Wagyu, tomahawk, farm to table. Really, like people who had the dinner are still talking about the dinner. It was incredible. Right overlooking the skyline of Nashville, and yeah, we even for the breaks, we provided all sorts of homemade refreshments and libations, and we really tried to make it a like immersive experience in every way, not just you know throwing out content, which I think that was also just incredible. These speakers, I know you haven't even gotten to day two, and they definitely were related topics, but it was two very different kind of experiences. They were both just the thing I keep hearing from people is they need to watch it again with like a notepad and take notes. So, and I feel like I need to, even though I was there. There you go. Yeah. So
Yeah, definitely. Like the first gentleman, the one that did School World Order, his name was
Mhm.
John, and
Jeff
I don't know
Lycett.
how to say his. Yes, and so I bought that book right after I saw him because I was like, okay, this is really interesting. I got to
So
get a lot
we
more into that because he
I
just
do want
got.
to tell people that we have a list on the site. So you can get like all the speakers' books. We posted that. We're going to add all the books that they talked about. We haven't gotten to that yet. That's a bit time consuming. So, but right now we do have all of the speakers' books listed there, and you
Oh,
can click the links to directly get their work. Yeah.
oh, perfect. All right, that makes it a lot easier because I was like, what's like I couldn't catch the name. I'm like Aaron something. I'm like, what's going on? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome because he was getting really in depth with a lot of different stuff that I was not fully aware about, like this what systems dynamics and
Yep.
scenario planning and Delphi method and all that stuff. So him like me being able to read the book is going to be a big help. So like that was a lot of good information that I saw there. So in terms of the Cognitive Liberty Conference, was there anything else that you've like been a part of in terms of like helping with events or getting people for events or anything like that? This was your first one,
Well, I did the Cause Fest last year.
the Cause
The
Fest.
creative
Yeah.
artists uniting for the sovereignty of everyone. In some ways, Cosfest was a much bigger undertaking. It was way more expensive. We had 53 acts in 2 days, so it was 26 and a half hours of content. And it was a big production. You know, we had musicians, we had comedians, we had filmmakers. I did aerial performances. So, you know, it required a lot of organization and production. But in some ways, it was actually I don't know, they were very different. This one was much more intellectually intensive. So in terms of organizing the content, I was much more involved in, you know, researching and figuring out how I was going to moderate and steer the conversations in order to bring the best out of my speakers and panelists. So yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. So that's something like me just doing like video,
Mhm.
like interviews and like doing like video editing, completely different ball game than doing like an event and getting people together and doing all that stuff. Like just organizing it with one person's already like something where it's like you for me like I try to be like organized and make sure that they know what we're going to talk about. There's no like gotcha questions, nothing I'm just going to throw out of nowhere and all that other stuff. So being able to like go through that whole entire process, that must have been a lot, especially like it's not just like a couple days where you set it up and then you're ready to go. It's definitely going to be a
No,
longer
it was
period
a
of
few
time.
months of preparation.
Yeah.
I had done a podcast with very much like day two with Jay Dyer, Stephen Coughlin, and Dr. James Lindsay. And this was about a year and a half ago. And I did it in my studio. So it was an in person. And that was, even though it was a podcast, it was really like putting together an event because I had, you know, all of them come to my studio and, you know, I had to host and organize the whole thing. So it felt very much like an event. And I really wanted to recreate that. But then it dawned on me that maybe it made sense to just make that an event instead of, um, you know, doing just another podcast. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So that's awesome. So in terms of before we like switch gears into the next
mhm.
topic, Math 1989 was asking, what was Courtney's favorite interview that she did, and why was it her favorite?
Oh, oh boy. It's a really tough question. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, in some ways, that might have been one of my favorites because it was a topic that I'm so passionate about, and because there was so much invested in organizing, you know, the four of us together. So in some ways, that's probably one of my favorites. I have a lot of favorites, though. They're all kind of different, and we go pretty deep. So it's one of those things. It's like any kind of it's going to sound a little like kind of woo to say it, but you know, I was a gymnast. I'm an aerial acrobatic performer. I was an actress, and sometimes like you're in that moment, and it's almost like um, I don't want to say channeling, but you know, you're almost just like you're so immersed that it's you know you're so in the present moment that it's hard to really capture it in hindsight. So to look back and be like, "That was my favorite," I don't know that I could quite do that. It's just there were so many of those that I had that kind of experience with. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. So that was thanks, Matt, for that question. That was That was nice. And then, so switching gears, so being objective in a massively subjective world. So obviously, you know Ryan Christian. I know Ryan Christian. Love the guy. Super objective, objective to a fault. It's amazing. Question everything. So especially you, like when you first started like getting into like materials and just how everything's being kind of like operated and run.
Mhm.
You came into it in 2020. So what was the basis for you to try to like parse through all this information? Because like you mentioned earlier, just the amount of information that we're just barrage, like we have a barrage of information and
Mhm.
propaganda. It's virtually impossible for anyone to try to keep up on every single thing that's going on like
Mhm.
every single day. There's not enough time whatsoever to be able to know everything or
Yeah.
a lot of everything that's going on. So how were you able to parse through information, try to find like the sources and try to like be able to still entertain things, but then still be able to find things that are factual that you can know for certain, like this is what happened or this is how things are going. So if you
Mm.
want to kind of delve into that a little bit about just being like objective.
Sure. So I would say that I think objective is a bit of a misnomer. I honestly, I know that's probably not the answer you want to hear, but I honestly don't think humans are capable of truly being objective. We can only see through our lenses, which means that we're looking at the world through. That does not mean that I don't believe in absolute truth. I do. I absolutely do believe that. But to say that we ever look at something completely devoid of bias, I think is a little bit misleading because we only look through things with our set of experiences, our knowledge base, our aptitude, our passions, like all of these things, our experiences, they all cloud our perspective. So I think that when we're looking at information, to expect anybody to be 100% objective is probably just it's a bit misleading to think that that's really a possibility. However, I do think it's really important to do your best to weigh out all information. To put your biases up front. I think that that's very helpful so that the reader or the viewer knows where you're coming from. I think one of the things that is most problematic is when people try to hide their biases and you don't know what their stance is, because then you don't know how to interface with it. You don't know how to interact with it. And that actually makes conversation and adjudication of information much more difficult. So I appreciate people who say, like, this is my bias, this is my perspective, this is where I'm coming from. So up front, these are the things that may have clouded some of the research that I have done. And then the audience, the people who are either viewing or reading your material, can now use their discernment to adjudicate the information that's been presented. So that's the first thing I'll say about objectivity. I don't actually really believe that it really exists. Again, that doesn't mean that I don't believe there's absolute truth. I do. I just don't think that human beings have the capacity to be truly unbiased. And I'd actually prefer somebody put their biases up front. Now, so having said that, I, of course, think it is really important, especially as a journalist, as a historian, as a researcher, to do your best to be as objective as possible. And the best way to do that, I always say, if people spent as much time adjudicating the information itself as they do vilifying or glorifying the source from which that information is derived, we'd live in a very different world. We would have a very different society. I think as a species, we would be much more evolved. And I don't mean evolved in like a woo-woo kind of spiritual sense. I actually mean that we'd achieve much more because we wouldn't be trapped by the cult of personality, which is what you really see. Typically, when people are adjudicating information, rather than looking and examining the information itself, typically what I hear is, well, where's the source from? What entity? What person? And do I like this person? Do I like this source? What are their credentials? What's their background? And I think that a broken clock is right twice a day. And you can't say, oh, that clock is wrong on when it's on that hour, that it's right. It's still right. And yes, it's a broken clock, so you don't trust it. You don't trust that it's always going to have the correct time, because it's not. But twice a day it will be right. And I think that's a really important lesson. It sounds so silly, I know. um, but it's a really important lesson, because that's what we need to do with information. We need to take the information, we need to read various sources We need to have a wide range of perspectives and then use our own discernment to adjudicate that information itself. But I think one of the biggest keys to that is context. So a lot of time in our information age, especially the world we live in with social media, we live in soundbite world. So people are typically looking at like a 140 character tweet or a 30-second video clip, and it's often, there's no way you could have rich, deep context with that. It's just not possible. It's a slice. And I think that context is very, very helpful to get closer to objectivity. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Well, definitely want to say thank you for that clarification in the beginning, because nobody, like you were saying, nobody can be completely objective. Like, of course, we're going to come in with our own biases. So thank you very much for clarifying that. To start, very, very important. People need to be aware of that. That is totally a thing. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So you have to be aware of that. And then definitely, like, especially if you're going to be a content creator. So going back to that, just having your biases up front, like you mentioned. So being able to convey to people, this is where I am. This is where like I'm coming from. So that's like you said, that's the prison I'm looking from. So just keep that in mind as I go and talk about this or talk about that, whatever else. Because like for me, if I hear somebody saying something that I completely disagree with, I can understand them coming to that conclusion based on the things that they know and the
Right.
experiences that they've had. Like if I went through the same thing as them, I would be thinking most likely the same thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just how it is. So it's all about just having that difference of opinion and being able to like parse through those things. So like you mentioned, reading various sources, getting an eclectic range of things,
Mm-hmm.
and then just trying to find those people that like with Ryan, he's not, obviously he's got some biases, of course, like you said, like with everybody, but then just consistently like speaking and then like kind of like going back and rewording what he's saying and saying like don't take my word for it, or like this is just my opinion, whatever else. So it just really
Mm-hmm.
puts that into perspective. Like yes, he's obviously coming from an angle, but it's still like keep that in the back of your mind to just question everything. Look at the sources themselves. Don't just judge it based on the cover. Or, oh, it's coming from Alex Jones, so it has to be fake or it has to be true.
Right.
But definitely being able to question those things. And just sometimes you can say like, I don't know. I don't know about something. I need to get more information about this. I can't like say for certain about whatever it may be. And then maybe down the line you get more information and that helps you get a clear picture. So that's
Yeah.
very, very important because so many people are just so divided. They just want to, like you said, want to get the sound bites, the 30-second clip, 140 character tweet, and then that's
Yep.
pretty much it. But context is so very important, and just getting a lot more details. Like, you can, read the title of an article. What's that really going to tell you? There's so much more that could be there. The title might be just completely misleading anyway, and you're going to find out, oh, it has no
Usually
sources.
is.
Usually it is. Oh, they said that this is like they're already starting to do something, and then it says, oh no, they're only talking about it. It's not even.
Right.
It's just in the discussion phase, so
It's
it's
just
completely
clickbait.
false. Yeah. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. People like to jump the gun really quickly, and like still people are really divided in the left-right paradigm, which for me, it's just boggles my mind.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's a lot of things that they agree with, which are completely detrimental to everybody else. That's not included in that little group. So people really need to start being more objective and just coming together. That's the biggest thing for me. So,
Mhm.
I know you mentioned in the beginning, like the Tavistock Institute,
Mhm.
you like one of the big things for you was just like the New World Order, like what they're planning. So going straight into that for people that maybe are just stumbling onto this for the first time, or people that already know a good amount, like
Mhm.
what in your opinion are they like fully planning? Like what's their like end goal? Because I know like I've heard people talk about like transhumanism, which is definitely something I can see coming. The whole AI issue, and then just the censoring of people and just genetically modifying genes and altering the human genome and all these other things, very scary things. Um, just like altering biology, just in general, whether it's like animals or insects, all those things. What in your opinion, like, are they planning like long term? Like, what's their end goal?
Well, I'm end goal. I don't know. They never seem to rest. So it seems like they're always working towards advancing new things. But it does look like in the not so long term, like the shorter, it's, I guess, in between, there's kind of it's called the AI World Society. So this is the UN 100 plan for the centennial of the UN, which is in 2045. And so they're talking about something what they call the AI World Society. And this is a partnership between, you can look it up on aiws.net, or you can go to the Boston Global Forum. And the Boston Global Forum has a book that they put forth, which is called Remaking the World, The Age of Global Enlightenment. This is written by Michael Dukakis, who's the former governor of Massachusetts. And he is the so he's the author of this book, and what he's putting forth, it's a very new age kind of concept, but what they lay out is very much detail is this AI world society, where they talk about how human governments will be completely supplanted by AI governments. They talk about the 6G harnessing the power of humans, and how we will have it will be like the internet of nano bio things. So it's not just the internet of things anymore. They're talking about nanotechnology that will have biosensors all throughout people, and this will connect us to everything. They talk about remaking the world. Remaking Ukraine. They say that they did a whole symposium on it. They said that Ukraine has been decimated by the war, and so we need to send constant funding and support to rebuild Ukraine. And the reason we need to do that, in their opinion, is because Ukraine is going to be the centralized hub for all of these nodes that are connected on the AI world society. So it's going to be these, smart cities, C40 cities, 15-minute cities, who are all connected through this AI world society. And Ukraine, they have deemed, is going to be the centralized hub for this. And so I don't know. I know Ray Kurzweil has said the singularity is near. Now he talks about how the singularity is nearer. And so it does seem he thinks that's going to be in 2045, which just conveniently happens to be the centennial of the UN. They've also, I had mentioned some of the theosophical roots of the UN, and these theosophers believe that they can channel. And in the AI World Society, if you go to their website, they talk about somebody from 2045, from the future, telling them why we need the AI World Society and how successful it is. This is a transhuman leading to a post-human agenda. So that does seem largely where they're aimed, what their goals are is. And if you read the works of, what I call the futurist architects, people like Kissinger and Brzezinski, Jacques Attali, they talk about how they were going to pit these clashes, these ideological clashes of the East and the West. So pitting communism, fascism, capitalism, and communism up against each other to create these managed dialectics so they could usher in the technocracy. They mentioned that was kind of their goal all along, and it does look like that's what we're seeing. So.
Wow, that sounds really fun. It's like a cool futuristic movie that we've all been dreaming of, and all these great things that we've had in our head, all these benevolent things that are just going to help out humanity for the betterment of everybody, right?
Oh yeah, that's
So
always how they couch it.
yes, exactly. So that's something that I'm definitely thinking as well, just the whole AI aspect, because I know that especially in Gaza and just
Mhm,
in Palestine, they've been doing a lot of AI targeting with that
mhm.
Absora AI software, just to completely find targets at a much quicker rate. And it's just oh, this guy might be here. He kind of looks like him. Whatever else, we're just going to attack him. And so that's a great thing to start off with, is just using AI to do warfare. So that's a really big red flag for me. And then just we were kind of talking about with the gene editing shots, I don't care if this gets censored on YouTube, they can kiss my ass. I'm just gonna post it somewhere else anyway. So that's something where people are getting just genetically modified. Who even knows the full ramifications of that? Obviously we have a lot more information now. But that's
I
something that's definitely really scary. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I can find this article. I thought I had it right in front of me, but maybe not. Um, there is it was in Zero Hedge, and it's an article on how the one world agriculture, and they're essentially making everything GMO, everything's genetically modified, everything is synthetic. And there's a lot of discussion. I know even during the 2020 time or 2021 rather, there was a lot of speculation about the legalities and potential patenting of humans if there's genetic modification. But now they're actually discussing that with, of course, if everything we eat is genetically modified and synthetic, what does that do to our DNA? And then do we become patentable creatures? I don't know.
Yeah, I remember hearing
That's
about
so
that.
dystopian to even say it, but yeah.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Like, I think in like 2021, Ryan was mentioning that. I forgot exactly where it was, but they're
Hmm.
mentioning like patenting humans based on changing their genes and their makeup.
Okay,
Um,
here it is. I do have it in front of
Perfect.
me. It's called "From Agrarianism to Transhumanism: The Long March to Dystopia." It's by Tyler Durden. I believe this is the Zero Hedge. So I don't know if people can see that, but anybody wants to. You could probably just look it up pretty easily from that title. But yeah, so yeah, total demolition of the previous forms of existence is underway. How one comes into the world, biological sex, education, relationships, family, and even the diet is about to become synthetic. From the neutral body to the post-human cyborg, a critique. Oh, this is Sylvia Guarini, a critique of gender ideology. So that's a quote that he used to start this. So. And then he says, we are currently seeing an acceleration of the corporate consolidation of the entire global agri-food chain.
yeah, because they're coming at it from so many angles. Like one thing that definitely stood out to me was 2020, um, the children. That is the biggest thing for me was just seeing how many children were being completely traumatized, completely isolated. Their brain structure was just being changed. Kids that were growing up that used to, like you were talking about, rely on those facial, verbal, or visual cues.
Yeah.
They weren't getting those, so they actually changed like the benchmarks for children as they're growing up. So they kind of like slowed that down or like extended that out where they
Right.
shouldn't be as old to have a certain milestone. So like that for me, that was the big issue was the kids because a
Yeah.
lot of them committed suicide and they're not even with us anymore. So that's a huge loss. And then especially with the advent of like the AI and
Hmm.
like even someone like yourself and myself, like I was depressed. Like my addictions were just getting even worse because I was isolated. I left my job over mandates, mask
Yep.
mandates, and temperature checks. So then like I was just in a rut. I just didn't feel like I had a place. I was just so used to doing like a 9 to 5 job. I was kind of like a lost dog because I was so dependent on doing that, not doing anything for like myself in terms of income. So like myself being already whatever 28 at the time, and then for a kid to be at such a young age and just getting their whole world shattered and like, oh, you're gonna kill grandma, don't touch them,
Mhm.
and whatever
Yeah.
else, you're spreading cooties and whatever. And then the advent of AI, especially now in the past couple of years, people doing like the GPT, and then like they have like these stupid apps where you can just talk to some fictional person. They just have like a stupid caricature that you're like texting and whatever else. It's just scary. It's just like the lack of human interactions and just completely isolating themselves. And I'm not even sure like what that's doing to them. And then like the whole VR aspect, me, myself being like a former video game addict, like I was using that constantly as a form of escapism based on like my childhood and then just things that I've done in my past, just trying to
Right.
escape all the time. So VR is just like a whole different beast.
Yeah.
Completely different. Like I was already getting a ton of dopamine just looking at a monitor or like a TV screen, but to be
Of course.
completely wrapped and submerged in the digital like infrastructure and just having like a screen right in your eyes. It's just complete. I can't even imagine that. So
I know.
like that stuff that's really scary for me, especially because the younger generation is gonna be at where we are, and like
Right.
what are they gonna do? What are they gonna believe in? What are they gonna support? What are they gonna like be opposed to? It's just like for me, it's just something that's really scary, and like the kids get a lot less of the scrutiny in terms of like the effect of all this stuff.
Yeah.
For me, that's like one of the most important things.
Yeah, I would agree. It's and we've seen that the kids suffered so much. They were declining IQs. There was all sorts of emotional challenges or developmental delays. It's been they've really suffered the most.
Yeah,
I think by design.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, oh yeah, I definitely think that as well. So Math is still on here. Thanks for watching, Math.
Yeah.
What can we do about these problems? So that's kind of like where I was going to go with the last
Yeah.
topic is like how can we prepare mentally, physically, spiritually? But then I guess going along with that is like what are some things that we could do like once we kind of focus on ourselves and being
Mhm.
prepared? Like what can we do? Um, like, obviously it's one thing to know the problem, but it's another thing
Right.
to know the solutions, because otherwise you're just gonna be kind of sitting there with your hands, like sitting on your hands and not doing anything, because it's like, oh, it's all hopeless. I'm just black pilled and everything's just gonna burn, and I might as well
Yeah,
just
that's
do
not
whatever.
helpful.
Yeah, it's not helpful at all. So, um, I definitely want to touch on like the just getting prepared mentally, physically, spiritually. So if you want to touch on that first, and then we can kind of delve into uh, some solutions as well.
Sure. Well, yeah, mentally, physically, spiritually. I mean, I think, that's going to look different for everybody. I think that it's great to do all the kind of cliche things, have several months of prep, whether that be your food, your medical, all of the things that you would need if there were to be some sort of a crisis and you don't have access at your fingertips. So definitely if you're in a position to do that, and whatever you can do to start building preparedness, I definitely encourage that. Obviously, if you have land and you're able to grow your own food and provide resources in that capacity, then that's a great thing to do. Spiritually, whatever your faith is, I would dive into that. And I think that that's definitely do the things that you love to do. I think that's a really important element. I remember in the beginning when I started this, it felt very doom and gloom. And doing all this work, it's kind of like, well, what's the point? If they steal your joy, then they've already won. So, do things that fulfill you, that bring you happiness, that bring you joy. Not in the strength through joy type of way, but really truly that you find fulfilling and meaningful. Spend time with your loved ones. Take care of your health. Take ownership of your health. I think people who are sick are much more dependent on big pharma, on the system. And obviously, there are things I believe out of our control, but there's a lot that's in our control. So, do things that fortify you, whether that be, through nutrition, through physical activity, but also through your relationships. I think people underestimate how powerful uh, your human interactions are and your socialization is, especially meaningful relationships, to your physical well-being. They actually really saw that during COVID. During the 2020, we saw how people being isolated and disconnected from their loved ones did really a disservice to their physical health and not just their mental and emotional health, obviously. And I would say in terms of like what can we do, I know you were that's kind of where you were leading into, and we can discuss this further. But I don't think there's like any one thing. I always tell people to follow their passions. So we saw the example I keep bringing up is that in 2020, a lot of the children were now sent home and they were in school on Zoom. And this was in many ways a silver lining because a lot of the parents started to see, oh my goodness, this is what my child is being taught in school. And many of them were quite horrified, rightfully so. And this is when they started to get involved. They started to get engaged. They started to go to school board meetings. They started to maybe run for office, maybe start objecting to some of the curriculum that was being pushed. And I think that that led them to do tremendous deep dive research. And I find, you can start with one thing that you're personally really passionate about, and it will probably lead you to many other things because the web is so intricately connected. So if you're really passionate about education, take a stand there, do some research and get involved in your community, do what you can, and take action in that regard. Maybe take political action and go talk to your legislators and tell them you don't like the policies they're putting forth. Maybe you care about farming. Maybe you have a farm. Maybe you come from a family of farmers, and this is something you're particularly passionate about. Then start researching there. Start getting involved. In that regard. So there's no shortage of things we can do, but we can't do it all. So, there's so much time that we can't even know all the problems, let alone tackle them all. So I really just think people need to start where their interests lead them and, start to take a stand where their passions guide them to do so.
Absolutely. So yeah, for me, like prepping mentally, physically, spiritually, like especially mentally, that was like the biggest thing for me because I had 7 years of depression and I started getting a little bit better, but I still was making mistakes. And I got to the point where I was suicidal. I never tried anything, but I was just in a really, really bad spot. I had PTSD from like certain incidences, and I was just not doing well whatsoever. I tried to do like learning still. I still was creating content at the time, but I was just not in a good place. And I was still doing so much coping. I was still smoking weed every single day and just playing video games and just trying to just have the days pass. I wasn't looking within and just working through my stuff and just bringing that stuff out to be able to transmute those negatives and turn those into positives. So like for me, especially since we were talking about COVID and just like the children, all that other stuff, so many people are still just like scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, just distracting themselves, doing whatever they can, whatever it may be, whether they're just eating junk food or just doing drugs or just hanging out with people that aren't really like friends, but more so just like also just helping distract them.
Right.
We're just doing so
Filler.
many things to distract. Yeah, just filler. And like you mentioned, like meaningful relationships, that's something that's really, really big. So if you're not having meaningful relationships, having that like natural boundary, respectful boundary of like, okay, I'll associate with you here and there. I'm not going to put so much time into you because I know where it's kind of leading. It's not
Right.
going to be for my betterment. It's going to kind of just keep me stagnant or drop me off. So
Mhm.
like one book I really, really like, I've read it, I'm rereading it and I'm doing like the
Okay.
questions because it's like a workbook is Shadow Awakening, The Dawn of
Okay.
Human Potential. I've interviewed this gentleman a few times,
Okay.
Odysseus Andrianos. Excellent book. Really talks about just uh, like, uh, like the masculine and the feminine, just like linear thinking, like the masculine thinking, like how we kind of usually
Mhm.
are in this society, like just go, 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 just have to get things done, like just like my past is is my present and then my future. But then there's also like the quantum, so
Mhm.
like the flow state, like how you kind of mentioned with some of your interviews, like you're just like so in the moment
Yeah.
that's hard for you to kind of like get back into that and like really kind of think about it.
It's hard to look back at it and analyze it because I'm like, it's almost like I don't always even remember, all the details. It was, yeah,
Yeah.
right in the flow state.
Yeah, so, like, with this, like, this it's already been an hour long, and it doesn't seem like it's been that long, so, like, just being in that flow state. So he talks about, like, a lot of different things, but a lot of it's just, like, a lot about introspective, work and just being, like, the best that you can be and just figuring out what your triggers are, like, what's affecting you, like, what things are you just projecting onto others that is
Mhm.
really just from yourself that you just don't like about yourself, and you're just trying to,
Right.
like, put onto others, "Oh, they're the problem, they're the problem." And
Right.
most people do that. Most people just, like I mentioned earlier, just look externally, and they're not taking that mirror and just shooting it back at themselves and saying, well, where am I in this whole world? And where am I like helping the problem? Where am I assisting that problem? And where am I not even helping myself either? But I'm just like helping everything just go in a worse direction because the way that I mean, it's pretty basic.
Mhm.
Like the gentleman John was talking about, he was talking about the trivium,
Mhm.
totally like right up my alley. That's exactly what I'm all about too. Like not input, processing, output, knowledge, grammar, rhetoric. It's all about like the way that the world is right now.
Mhm.
That's the output. That's already the effect. So what's causing the world to be the way it is? So we have to kind of like backtrack and say, why is this happening? And it starts
Yeah.
with us internally. Like, why are we supporting these people that are pretty much almost all psychopaths? Some of them are just like not aware of what's going on, but a lot of like the top people are most likely sociopaths, psychopaths, and we're
Mhm.
just supporting them and giving excuses to this stuff because this is we're just kind of like thinking in our own little box of like this is the only way that we can like have any sort of solution is by voting or by doing X, Y, or Z. But we have so many other options, like you were talking about with like your passions. Every single thing in this world is pretty much being affected. So if you find like whatever you're passionate about and you try to go towards like improving that, you're going to be improving it because it's probably being affected in a negative way. So you can
Yeah.
make a small difference. So like that's definitely something to consider. And another huge thing, of course, is like the mentality or like your physical body. So one thing that I really love taking, I wish I had it right on me. I probably do because I have so many of them. So
Mm.
like for myself, I usually always am taking Shilajit.
Mm.
You can find a bunch of different brands. This one's lab tested. I've interviewed this guy. I love this guy, but I don't make a single penny off of talking about it. I just personally take it I've been taking it for years now and I love it. It's been awesome, game changer. Especially for me, like my brain was not working as well. My hair was thinning because I was so stressed out and had PTSD and was suicidal. So it helped like with that. It helped with like my muscles, helped with like stamina, helps all your
Wow.
organs out, helps detox heavy metals from your brain, helps all your organs out. It's very, very beneficial. It's pretty much like what can't it do? Like it's just so good. So like obviously be mindful. Don't just take my word for it. Look it up for yourself. Do your own digging. If you don't even want to support this company, it doesn't matter to me. Just like try to find one that's really, really good. And I've seen a lot of great benefits from that. I take that every single day. Um, and then, as I mentioned earlier, with like burnout. So like that's definitely something people need to keep in mind too. Like if we're just like always trying to learn,
Yeah.
always trying to like get something going and improve something, and you just put so much on your plate, you're gonna get to the point where your body's gonna like give up on you. Like something's gonna be in your way that's gonna have to like it's gonna force you to stop and slow down. So always be aware of that. Try to have some rest. I do like meditations as much as I can on a
Mhm.
daily basis. Getting like limiting screen time, and like you mentioned, like just having like those relationships and stuff like that. So for myself, I try to like go outside barefoot, ground, walk
Yeah.
around outside. Of course, like the fitness aspect is super crucial. So whatever you can do, depending on if you're like able-bodied or not able-bodied, like some
Mhm.
people, like I've seen people without an arm, like they're still working out, they're still doing
Oh,
this, they're still
yeah.
doing that. Like there's no like, I mean, you obviously we do a lot of self-limiting to ourselves and our like detracting ourselves from like what our actual potential is. But like just keep doing what you can. Like every single day, just be a little bit better. Like I can't believe I have to believe it because it's happened, but
Yeah.
it's so hard for me to see like where I was
Right.
just like 6 months ago to where I am now. And then especially like a couple years ago to where I am now. I would have never guessed that I would be able to get to this point. But it's just about getting those slow like wins every single day and being able
Mhm.
to just add on top of that because our minds are able to be malleable and then we can change and we can like instead of having a short attention span because you're always watching TikTok or whatever else those 30-second
Mhm.
videos, you can get to the point where you're able to watch like a long form video or like a
Mhm.
podcast such as yourselves or especially like Ryan's where it's like 4.5 hours. Holy moly! But like we have to be able to do that sort of thing. And then like in terms of solutions for myself, like especially gardening, when like you mentioned, I try to do that. No chemicals in my stuff.
Awesome.
I like, but like of course with like the spraying that they do in the sky, like maybe having a greenhouse, also a good thing. And then you already have those skills as well with yourself, but being able to collaborate with others, doing some
Mhm.
sort of networking, because like you said, we can't do it all. So
Nope.
like we're always going to have some sort of like strengths and some sort of weaknesses. Some other people might have some other ones because they're just have different passions, of course, because everyone's different. So that's definitely something to consider is having those that network of reliable people that like those
Mhm.
meaningful connections with people. And that's something I'm still trying to work on. I've been trying to get like
Mhm.
in contact with my neighbors and stuff like that. It's not really working too much, but that's definitely something we need to do. We have to start
Mhm.
coming together because there's so much division out there, and
Yes.
there's still such a big, huge information gap. Some people just don't know anything that's going on whatsoever. They look up in the sky and think that it's just whatever. It's hazy. I don't know why it's hazy, but it's hazy. So it's definitely
Yep.
something to keep in mind. Like there's just like so many things that people can do. Um, so yeah, if you have anything to add, maybe like in terms of just like other like ways of prepping, because like yeah, definitely food, medicine, just like any sort of like supplies that someone could think of. Like where are you located? Like for me,
Mhm.
like I don't really have to worry about tornadoes too much.
Mhm.
I'm like almost in like the Chicagoland area, so I don't really have to worry about that. But there could be a power outage, there could be a
Yeah.
snowstorm, there could be like other things. So depending on where you're located, getting like a book that helps you find like local foraging opportunities for yourself. Like for me, I got a lot of things that I could possibly get, like blackberries, blueberries, whatever else. Just
Very
depends
cool.
on what you know. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
like they're kind of coming at it
Communicate.
from all angle. They're coming at
Yeah.
it from all angles, so it's really hard to like really be prepared. You really can't fully be prepared, but
I was going to say communications. You want to have some sort of communications preparedness. Um, I sell the satellite phones, and this is not, obviously you don't have to use the ones I sell, but to have some sort of a means of being able, you can find that on my website, but to have some sort of means of being able to communicate if the power were to go down, if the grid were to go down, if we had some sort of like cyber polygon type of experience, just to, and maybe also have a network of people who you could be able to access, whether that be in your community or your family. But I think a lot of people don't think about that. So communications is definitely important. Defense of some sort. So whatever that is for you, I'm grateful we do have a Second Amendment in this country. I think it needs to be defended. So if that's something that you support and partake in, then certainly I think that's, but any means of defense, because at times of chaos, people get desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. So you do want to be able to defend yourself and protect yourself. And then, yeah, things like you were saying, if the power goes out, how are you going to, even if you have the food, like how are you going to cook it? How are you going to provide light and heat? So, generators and, various types of backup means for energy are good things to consider as well. So hopefully we don't need any
absolutely.
of it, but it's good to have.
I know, because I've been doing prepping for a good amount of time, probably since 2016. Like that was where I was starting to do like financial preparation. And then
Mm.
like 2017, 2018 is when I started gardening. So I've
Oh,
done a lot of that stuff. And
yeah.
I have a lot of stuff. I have a good amount of stuff, but I mean, who knows? Something could happen to where I have to leave my house, and then like I have to leave all this behind. So it's like you could
Right.
have nothing. So like it really just ends up being like it's a crapshoot. You have no idea. But hopefully, like you said, we don't have to worry about that stuff. Hopefully, people start becoming aware enough to realize, okay, these people are also human beings, at same as me. Why am I like? Why are they able to do something that I can't do? And why
Right.
are they not held accountable the same way I would be held accountable? Doesn't make any
Right.
sense. Oh, I can just like quit my job after I commit a crime and then I'm fine, right? I
Right.
just quit in disgrace, so I'm good, right? Everything's balanced. No, it doesn't
Right.
work that way. It doesn't make any sense to me. Karma is a real thing, as far as I'm aware. It seems like to be a very legitimate thing in my eyes. I've seen it happen in my own personal life, so hopefully things start shifting and people start becoming more aware before it's too late. Because
Mm-hmm.
like we've mentioned before, like with the AI and just like manipulating everything, like where like unless we can find something to reverse some of these things and like backtrack it, like I'm not sure where we're going to be able to fix a lot of this stuff. So it's definitely something that I try to be as hopeful as I can, but I still try to be as realistic as I can. It's tough because there's just a lot of stuff that's going on. Seems like it's a big losses for us. Like a lot of people we lost in 2020 and beyond. And then like the genocide that's happening and just all these people and just nothing really being done about it still. And it's just really just a travesty. All this needless suffering that we don't need to have happening anymore because we're all in this together. We're all the human race on this planet. We should be stewards of this planet. It's really quite simple. We should not be divided. Like we all want the same things: clean air, clean food, clean water, the
Mm-hmm.
necessities, and then like live and let live. I just don't get it. It's just really hard to imagine people still supporting all this stuff, but it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you had anything else to add other than that, I can, I'll put your website up. Obviously, it's scrolling at the bottom, but if you want to just let people know like where they can find you, of course, they're going to find you there. But like, what do you have coming up as well that you're really, really excited about, and what people can expect from you in the future?
Yes. Well, I would say definitely check out my work at CourtenayTurner.com. So that's CourtenayTurner.com. And yeah, so I have all my podcasts there. And I think we have about, I guess I'm on episode 4. What is that? I don't know. But I think I have over
427.
427. Okay. But I do have over 500 videos. Sometimes I put, shows that I've been on and I put them on. So it is over 500 on there. And you can also support my work there. And I would also encourage people to check out the cognitivelibertyconference.com. You can go to I think it's an aerial speaking events page on my website, or you can go directly to cognitivelibertyconference.com. And we are still selling tickets. As I said, I'm putting it onto a new platform, so it'll be a more user-friendly and enjoyable experience for everyone. But that was just a wealth of content and information, really valuable, and I think so important. We did really speak to a lot of the division that is being stoked, and the roots of that philosophically, spiritually, and practically, how that is being applied and what you can do to step out of the wizard circle, so to speak. That's actually their words. Literally, they do think that they are wizards and they are casting spells. So if we can recognize it, then it's kind of like the sleight of hand of magic. If we know the trick, then it no longer appears like magic. So I think it's really important for people to understand that and how that works and what's behind it. So yeah, I encourage people to go check that out. And for what's coming up, I know I'm going to be speaking in New Orleans in I think 3 weeks, and I have several podcasts lined up, and yeah, I don't know. We will be doing another Cognitive Liberty conference, but probably not till maybe November or so, maybe a little bit further out. It's been a lot, so and then at some point, I'm gonna have to start writing. So.
Oh yeah, really quickly, because I know you mentioned that, and I forgot to circle back to that. So, do you mind sharing anything regarding your book? Like, is this something that you've already kind of talked about? Like, do you
I
have any
have,
mind
yeah,
sharing?
I talked about it. I think maybe I might have talked about it a little bit on the day 1 of the conference, but I definitely talked about it at day 2. It's just this concept I call the compassion trap. So I think it's part of how they weaponize dialectics is they, you had mentioned like killing grandma, right? So nobody wants to be a grandma killer. So they appeal to the best aspects of humanity. I would argue they exploit the best aspects of humanity. And there's been some research done on weaponized empathy, but this kind of takes it a step further. It appeals to human nature, the desire to alleviate one's suffering, not just to relate to it, but to actually want to remove it. And so it compels people to take action. And I think that they create these narratives that foment dialectical tensions by appealing to the compassion, and you fall into kind of one or the other, and now you become like ferocious mama bears essentially, or Gnostic high priests, and then you start fighting each other. This is how they get groups to fight against each other. And I think that it's very different than individuals fighting each other, because no matter how much I may disagree with a person, I may even dislike that person, it's very hard to stare somebody face to face in the eye and, not recognize their humanity. So you can dislike them, you can disagree with them, but it's still much harder to fight somebody one on one. Whereas when you're in groups and you're fighting for my team versus your team, it becomes much easier. Become You remove the humanity, and I think that's part of their goal is to dehumanize. So that's kind of the gist of it. But obviously, it requires quite a bit to put together. But that's the broad strokes overview, the bird's eye view.
Yeah. I love that title. That's really good. Short, like before you even mentioned just saying the compassion trap, I already knew where you were
What
going with it. Yeah, because that's awesome. Like, because that's absolutely what they're doing. So that's very, very good. I think that's gonna be fantastic. I look forward to that because I'm definitely gonna be a customer. I'm definitely gonna be buying that. So I look forward to that. I wish you the best of luck with that as well. I wish you the
Thank
best of luck
you.
with everything you have going on in the near future. Thank you so much for coming on, Courtney. It really was a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for like having like the interest in coming on in the first place. It really does mean a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, and thank you everybody that was watching. Thank you for everyone that watches in the future. It really does mean a lot to me. Thank you guys so much, and take care.